Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Cihan Çobanoğlu. I'm the president of Association of North America Higher Education International. I would like to welcome you on a distinguished lecture series. Today we have Professor Jason Shaw with us, and we have about 1 minute. We will be starting momentarily, and I see that you are coming in, and I hope you can hear and see us, both of us, clearly. And for those of you who are joining, I see that about 20 people already joined, which is wonderful. If you hear me, there is a hand button that feel free to raise the hand. So, yep, I see some of you already raised the hand. That's wonderful news. And while we are doing that, I'm going to do a couple of, oh, perfect. Thank you. For those of you who raised the hand, so I can see you doing that, that is wonderful. So I'm gonna also go live on Facebook. I see that a lot of people have joined. So I would like to welcome you one more time formally. My name is Dr. Cihan Çobanoğlu. I welcome you to ANAHEI, Association of North America Higher Education International Distinguished Lecture Series. Today we have Professor Jason Shaw, which I will introduce him in a second, but I would like to just go over, as I said, my name is Professor Cihan Çobanoğlu. I'm the president of ANAHEI, which is a not-for-profit organization. I also work as a McKibben Endowed Chair Professor at the University of South Florida, Sarasota, Manatee. I'm the director of M3 Center, which is a research center, and I edit 3 journals, as you can see on the screen. Just a quick housekeeping item for you, those of you who already joined. You will see in your control panel, raise hand, which some of you already did. If you didn't do it, you can just click on it. So that just tells us that everything, all of our voice and the video is coming good. There is 2 other buttons over here, chat and questions and Q&A. Please feel free. Thank you again for those of you who raised the hand. We see it. Wonderful. Throughout the presentation, Professor Shaw is going to do his presentation. And then if you have any questions throughout this presentation, please type them either in chat or Q&A. It doesn't matter which one you use. And I will read them to Professor Shaw after he starts presentation. He's going to do it about 45 minutes or so. And then we'll have 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end of his presentation. Just a quick information about ANAHEI. As I have mentioned briefly before, it's a not-for-profit organization. The aim, the goal of ANAHEI is to promote and encourage a global culture at member institutions, globalize student and faculty successes, enhance global initiatives just like we are doing right now with Professor Shaw, and deepen global engagement. Some of the programs of ANAHEI, for those of you who are familiar, may already know this. We have a visiting scholars program. We match the scholars from around the world with the universities in America. We got partnership programs with different universities. I actually just came back from China 3 weeks, visited many different universities. They're wonderful partnership programs. ANAHEI also have some journals, which I will go over, conferences, awards, and of course this distinguished lecture series as we do. This is one of the ANAHEI journals, as you can see here. It's the International Interdisciplinary Business Economics Advancement Journal. Of course, compared to Professor Shaw's journal, Journal of Academic Management, this is baby. It's a new journal, but it's open access, true open access. Doesn't cost any money to submit or access published articles. The other one is Journal of Global Education and Research. You can find the URL on the screen. Feel free to submit articles there. Several conferences ANAHEI produces and sponsors. One of them is Global Conference on Education and Research that happened in May in Sarasota, Florida. At USF actually was the host venue. And 8th International Interdisciplinary Business Economics Advancement Conference. We're going to do the 8th one in November, just before Thanksgiving in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on a cruise. That's an amazing conference. Graduate Student Research Conference in Business Economics. We had the first one in May in Sarasota. The next one is going to be in Miami next year in March. GloServe, Global Conferences on Services Management. This is coming up in October in Italy. We have about 150 abstracts submitted for this wonderful conference. And next March, we're going to be again at FIU, Global Conference on Hospitality, Tourism, Event, and Leisure Management, as you can see here. In the distinguished lecture series featured Ravidar from Yale University earlier. We also featured Professor Levent Altanay from Oxford Brookes University. And today we are proud and privileged to host Professor Jason Shaw, which I'm going to introduce him to you as the next item. But all of these lectures and the previous lectures is recorded as we record right now. Please feel free to go there, view this one later, or the ones that we already have done earlier. Last but not least, I would like to introduce Professor Jason Shaw to you. Professor Shaw is chair professor and head of the Department of Management and Marketing, the Yeung Endowed Professor, and director of the Center for Leadership and Innovation in the Faculty of Business at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. He is the editor-in-chief of the Academy of Management Journal. AMG is the top journal in Financial Times, top 50 journals used in business school research rankings. AGM's impact factor 6.2, 5-year impact factor 10, and ranked 3 out of 192 journals in the category of management and number 2 out of 120 journals in the category of business. He received his PhD from the University of Arkansas. His research has appeared or accepted for publication in consensus top-level journals such as Academy of Management Journal, Academy of Management Review, Journal of Applied Psychology, Organization Science, Strategic Management Journal, Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, and Personal Psychology. In addition to practitioner-oriented outlets such as the Harvard Business Review, Compensation and Benefits Review, and the Work at Work Journal. His research interests include turnover patterns, team effectiveness, and psychology of the financial incentives. He is currently the lead investigator on the Impact Project, which I know that he is going to present about this, a global study of reactions to pay changes. Without further ado, Professor Shaw, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being our distinguished lecture series. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Jihan, very much for the introduction, and good morning, everyone, or good evening, as the case may be. So the sun is coming up here in Hong Kong, and I suppose the scenery will change a little bit behind us as the morning goes along. So this morning I'm going to present some initial information about a major work in progress that I've been working on for the last really almost 3 years now. And in terms of tangible outputs or final results and so forth, I don't have any to present to you today, but instead we'll take a little bit a different type of presentation and just talk about the Impact Project in terms of how it got started, in terms of the theories that undergird the project and the progress that I've made to date, along with the help of many other people around the world. So I know we have quite a diverse audience today. So just let me give you a brief amount of background before I start talking about the project. So if you know anything about the PolyU, or the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, here you'll know that in my department sits a legendary figure, a legendary cross-cultural psychologist, Michael Bond. And Michael Bond is a great guy, and we end up in a lot of very nice conversations. But one of the things that happens if you talk to Michael Bond about any topic is it tends to turn to some discussion of cross-culture or cross-nation differences in people's reactions and experiences and so forth. So after moving here, this was an education to me in many ways, and I started thinking or considering how these differences might play out in terms of my own research program. And I guess the short story, or the short ending to the story, is that I wrote a grant proposal to on one of my major topic areas, which is the psychology of people's reactions to incentives or to pay changes. and purported to collect data in as many places around the world as I could to test some general theories about how people might react to their pay changes, in this case merit pay or performance-based pay changes. So that's the general idea of the study, and I'll spend some time this morning talking about the background of the study and how it got or what progress we have made today. Okay, so I'm going to try now to share my screen with you and show the presentation.
It looks great. We can see it very clearly.
Okay, good. So this is the impact project, and I'll explain what impact means if you are confused, I guess, about what the acronym stands for. I joke sometimes that I've been working on the project for 3 years, but the first 6 months were dedicated solely to the creation of a meaningful acronym for the project. But finally, this is a joke, of course, but finally we got one, and the label for the project is IMPACT, which stands for Investigating Merit Pay Across Countries and Territories. One of the pieces of inside information about the project is at the beginning, we use the acronym IMPACT and the T on the end simply to spell out impact, which makes it sound better than impact. But later the T became meaningful because we realized we had the opportunity to collect data in places that were not necessarily considered by all countries, that maybe they were governmental territories or governed by some authority. Some examples of this would be the Palestinian Authority. So we have data from Palestine in the project already. And this is a global study of how people react to pay changes, which we define in the project as merit pay, or increases that are somehow tied to a measure of performance. So merit pay is mostly a North American label for this type of pay change. The participating company does not have to call their program merit pay to be included in the project. It simply has to meet the definition of merit pay, which is that you are giving employees or workers pay raise that is somehow or presumably tied to a measure of performance. So I like to call this the globe of rewards research. So I would guess that many people in the audience today are familiar with the GLOBE project, which was a leadership project conducted, I believe, in about 60 countries around the world a number of years ago. So we like to call this the globe of rewards research, but we hope to make it so good, of course, that later the globe will be called the impact of leadership research. So we're trying to make the project as broad in scope and as comprehensive as we can around the world. Currently, there are about 50 countries and territories currently involved in the project. And by involved, it means that I have a local partner who is in these countries trying to help me collect data that meet our criteria for inclusion. And there are about 70 people around the world who are currently helping me on the project in some way. Most of these people are researchers, but they're not always researchers. Sometimes they can be people who are working in business organizations or other roles. But the idea is that they are providing some insight, some leverage, some local knowledge, some local connections that will help us collect data that meet the criteria for inclusion in the study. So what I'm going to do now is turn to a brief description of the underlying theories in the project. So this is a theory testing project, and the idea is not to develop beforehand or a priori a cross-cultural theory of how people would react, but rather to outline 4 general theories about how people might react, and then subject those theories to testing in the different countries, different contexts around the world. So as a beginning point for the project, I outlined 4 general theories from 4 different areas of the psychological literature as a way of framing the study. So the first theory comes from the field or the sub-area of psychophysics. And in this sub-area, we would have a theory that is commonly known as a threshold theory, or the theory of just noticeable differences. And the assumption of this particular theory is that when pay changes from one level to the next level, that there is some range of pay change across people which is undetectable or unnoticed. The classic studies in the psychophysics tradition on this threshold would be studies of how people would react to the change in the brightness of light or to the loudness of sound. So for example, if I played some of my favorite music this morning while we were all listening, I might be able to increase the sound level or the decibel level of the music in very small increments. And then if I ask you to participate by raising your hand or notifying me somehow on the talk, if I ask you to indicate the point at which the sound was a little bit louder, we might be able to calculate a stable, constant threshold across people where people began to report that it is a little bit louder now. And of course, this would be somehow tied to the capabilities of the human ear and so forth. So at some threshold, below some threshold, the volume would actually be increasing, or the decibel level would actually be increasing, but we were unable to detect the difference in the sound. But at some level, we would begin to say, this makes a little bit of a difference now, or it's a little bit louder now. So if we apply this theory to the study of pay changes, the theory would suggest that there is some range of pay increase or pay change, below which people would have the same reaction, and that reaction would be ambivalence. That is, they simply could not detect in some way that would influence their attitudes or their behaviors the change in their pay. Below this threshold, we would say that the pay increases were somehow meaningless or undetectable. And then at some point across people, participants would begin to say, this pay increase makes a little bit of a difference now. For example, it might make a little bit of a difference in terms of my happiness. I would say I'm slightly pleased with this increase. Or it might make a difference in terms of my effort. That is, I will work a little bit harder now, or I will give a little bit more effort now. So if we take this theory, then we would predict that reactions to pay changes are a constant fraction of base pay. That is, there are some minimum thresholds which exist. And it might look something like this, which is, this is a simple depiction of the relationship between a merit pay increase expressed as a percentage and some reaction. In this case, I just chose effort as a common reaction. And the theory would suggest that as pay increases across people, there would be no reaction. That is, everyone would have the same ambivalent reaction. And then at some point, pay increase would be positively associated with the reaction. That is, the change from a 5 to a 6 or a 7% increase would evoke a slightly more positive reaction among people. And then at some point, we might see some weakening of the slope at higher incentive levels or higher merit pay levels. So according to the theory, raises below this threshold would be meaningless in terms of being able to evoke any reactions. And a large raise would be decreasingly meaningful. That is, a 30% increase would not elicit the same, would not elicit a proportional or proportionally more positive response than a 20% increase. So the theory would suggest a relationship that looks something like this. And this is different than what we typically think about in terms of incentives, which is the reactions of people are linearly related to the increase size, that there is some monotonic relationship between merit increase and effort. This theory would suggest that there's actually a sweet spot, that somewhere between the minimum threshold and the maximum threshold is the point where people have the most sensitive reactions to the merit pay increase. Those of you with some economics background will realize that this has something in common to do with a utility approach to managing pay increases. And that would be true, although there are some different assumptions with the psychophysics approach relative to a utility theory view of giving increases. That's theory one. Theory two comes from the organizational behavior literature, or the management literature, as some of you might know it. And this is an old, quite simple perspective on how people would react to their pay changes. We would call this the value discrepancy approach as a general way of thinking about it. And in the value discrepancy approach, the theory assumes something completely different. The theory assumes that people have different levels of value, or assign different levels of value to different levels of raises. The second theory suggests that we are not all the same in terms of how much we value a certain level of pay increase. The psychophysics theory suggests that our reactions across people are identical and subject to these minimum threshold effects. The value discrepancy approach says we all value raise levels or incentive levels differently. And so to understand my reaction to my merit increase, you would have to know how much I value that particular level of increase, or perhaps you would have to know what is the smallest amount that would have pleased me. And so if we can understand what the smallest amount is that would please a certain individual, then we can better gauge their reaction to the increase. If we express it as a simple interaction, which I just drew for purposes of illustration, it would look something like this. So on the x-axis, we have a merit increase size, and then the different lines, the solid line and the dotted line, depict the difference between those who value a higher minimum increase. That is, they say that a larger amount is needed to please them. And that is the dotted line, sorry. And the solid line are those people who say that a lower amount would be the minimum amount that would please them. And so if I'm able to get a measurement of these differential minimum pleasing amounts, then I'm able to look at the interaction between what people actually receive and what their reaction would be. The theory would predict a relationship that looked something like this. That is, among those who say that a smaller amount would please them, their reactions tend to be quite positive to any pay raise size, that is, any actual received amount. The slope is weakened and the intercept, if you will, is quite high. But among those who say that a higher raise is needed to please them, then we would see some people who were quite unhappy or devastated or disappointed with receiving a small increase. And only among those that received a large increase would we see positive reactions. So those of you that like to talk about slopes, we would say that the slope of the relationship between merit raise size and an outcome like happiness would be stronger among those with higher minimum pleasing levels. That is, that they stated that a larger amount was needed to please them. So this is a simple theory we would call value discrepancy theory. And we also use that as one of the theories to explain how people might react to their pay change. The third and the fourth theories are both expectations theories, but they come from different areas of the literature. The first I would call the expectation theory of surprise. So this is my label. There's no theory out there that is the expectation theory of surprise. That's just my label for it. And the idea here is that if you look at the literature on met expectations, what the literature shows quite clearly is that predicting reactions to unmet expectations, that is receiving an outcome that is different than you expect, reactions to unmet expectations can be very complicated or very difficult to predict. If it was easy to predict, then we would say someone who receives 3% more than they expected would be moderately happy, and someone who received 3% less would be moderately sad or moderately disappointed. But as it turns out, in the expectations literature, there isn't such a symmetry. And so researchers in different areas have tried to come up with theory or reasoning that would explain the differential patterns of happiness and disappointment and anger that might result from receiving an outcome that was different than your expectation. So one way of looking at it is this way, which we call the expectation theory of surprise. And this idea is that perceptions of control, how much control people believe they have over their outcome, will determine whether they are pleased by an overmet expectation and devastated by an undermet expectation. And the idea here is that when we have control over something, we are more surprised when we get less than we expect. This is what the theory would suggest. Here's what I mean by that. Consider a merit pay system. So assume that you are working in an organization and you know that in a few weeks you will be told what your merit increase is for the year. If you're working in academics in North America, I mean, this is, although pay increases have been quite meager in recent years, this is typically how we would receive a pay increase, a merit-based pay increase. So let's say that the pay increase cycle is coming up and you ask me beforehand, how much control do you have over your outcome? That is, are you able to affect your pay level or your pay increase by your behavior or by your performance? And let's say that you say that you have a lot of control over your outcome, that you believe the system is good, the system is fair, that you are performing well, and so forth. The theory would predict that in such a situation, you would be quite surprised if you received less than you expect. And in these types of situations, when people are asked to report or describe their surprise, they tend to do so with negative emotions that are quite powerful or hot, maybe, to use just a common word. So if you believed you had control, you expected 5%, but you received 2%, then you are likely to report that you are surprised, but also that your negative emotions are quite powerful. You're angry, you're severely disappointed, you're in despair, you're disgusted, and so forth. But the theory suggests that in that same situation where you believe you have control over the outcome, you are not so surprised by reactions that exceed your expectations. Here, you might be pleased, but the surprise is muted, or it is only a pleasant surprise or a minor type of surprise. So you expected to receive 5, but you received 8 or 9. And so, of course, this would evoke some positive reaction, but people's reactions would tend not to be, according to the theory, would not be so powerful and positive. So you would say this is pleasant, or this is a nice surprise, or something like this. You would be devastated when you receive less than you expect. You would be pleasantly surprised if you receive more. But what about the situation where you have no control? This would be like a lotto or a lottery situation where you buy your lottery ticket and you realize by the design of the program or the design of the game that you have no control, that the outcomes are determined at random or by a lucky draw, as we like to say. And in such a situation, how would we predict people's reactions to an outcome that was more, or a pay raise that was more than they expect versus less than they expect? And the theory suggests that in such situations, we are more surprised when we get more than we expect than we get less than we expect. So let's go back now to our example from the pay raise administration in your workplace. So 1 month before the pay raise is going to be announced, I asked you, do you have control over your pay increase or the outcome you're going to receive? And you say, Jason, no way, I have no control. This is a bad system. Performance is evaluated in a biased way or an inaccurate way, or my supervisor likes other people more than me, or whatever the case may be. You believe that whatever the outcome is certainly not within your control. So I ask you then what you expect to receive, and you say, I expect to receive 5% as my increase. So what happens when you receive 2% in our hypothetical example? Well, the theory would suggest that you might be slightly surprised, but only slightly so. That is, if I ask you to describe your reaction, you would just say, well, what am I going to do? I had no control over the outcome and I lost the game, or I didn't get the paid increase that I expected. As a result, if I asked you to tell me about your emotional reaction, you would say something like, I'm slightly disappointed, or something like this. But your reaction would not be a visceral negative reaction. As we would maybe say where I'm from, you would just throw up your hands like, well, what are you going to do? It was a random outcome, and this is the outcome that I got. In such situations, if we get more than we expect, the theory would suggest that we would be very excited about it, that this would produce a positive surprise that led to the reports of very positive emotion. I'm excited. I'm very lucky, I'm thrilled, I'm enthusiastic. What a great day this is. I expected to receive 5. I had no control over the outcome. And wow, I've received 10%. This is really a super lucky day. So this is what the theory would suggest. And if we tried to plot it out in a relatively simple way to understand, this is what it would look like. I realize the sun, this is going to be a little bit unusual here, but let me lower my shade.
No problem. Professor Shaw, while you're doing that, we are getting some questions. Do you want to take them at the end? Would you like me to ask them to you at the end, or you want to take them in the right now?
Sure, we can just take them now. Yeah, why
okay.
not?
Let me read you. 2 questions came. Okay, the first one, it's an exciting idea, but I wondered how to establish a solid relationship between people's reactions and their actual engagement / behavior afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, this is a great question. So when we're recruiting companies for the project, one of the things that is always talked about is what are the major downstream effects of these pay changes. The way the study is designed, and what interests me the most, is people's immediate reactions to the changes rather than their reactions months later. So I'm trying to understand the psychology, if you will, of people's immediate reactions. So I'll get to the design in a few minutes, but the design of the study is to look at expectations just before and reactions just afterward. And I look at only two categories, two general categories of outcomes. One is affect or happiness. Another way to think about this is whether people are pleased with the raise that they receive. And the other one is effort. That is, do these pay changes predict in any way how people will react in terms of them saying, I'm going to work harder or less hard as a result of the raise. It may become a little bit clearer when I get to the method.
Wonderful, thank you. The other quick question, I don't know if it is quick or not. You may want to wait until later to answer this, but what if the reaction pacing is different among individuals? Some people may react to changes like in a year. How to detect their reactions?
So I have a really short answer to this question, which is in this study, we can't. I mean, we have a relatively simple design, just 1 month before and 1 month after. So this, for those of you that are interested in pay research and want to design, the next study, this is a very commonly discussed issue, which is how long do people's reactions to pay changes last? Even if we can show in this study, for example, that people have a consistent or predictable pattern of reactions to their pay changes, how long will these changes last? This is an unknown question. My intuition, or just my thought about this, is that pay change decisions in some ways have longer effects, because even if I just get a 1% increase in base pay, this does go into my base pay, and over the course of 20 or 30 years with the idea of compound interest, it becomes a non-trivial amount, even though it may seem trivial at the moment. So in a way, they have longer, maybe have longer reactions than other decisions, but certainly they have a lifespan. That is, after some period of time, maybe weeks or months, we turn ahead and look for the next outcomes that we're going to receive.
Wonderful. Please continue with the presentation. I will later ask you more questions.
Okay, great. So just to wrap up this particular theory, so don't pay a lot of attention to where I've drawn the lines. So I just drew the chart to be illustrative. So where the intercepts are and so forth is basically irrelevant. But the slopes of the lines should give you an idea what the theory would predict. On the left side of the chart, you would have the low control condition. And in this situation, when people don't have control, you would see the greatest happiness among those who received more than they expect. This would be euphoria, enthusiasm. And in the high control part of the chart on the right side, this is designed to be illustrative of the devastation that certain people would feel when they received less than they expect. So the high point on the left side and the low point on the right side are really the key drivers in this particular theory. Then the last theory is another expectations theory, and this comes from more the behavioral economics types of reasoning. And the assumption here is that, again, that people tend to have asymmetric reactions to under and overmet expectations. So how do we predict this difficult to predict pattern? And from this theory, the key issue is not control. The key issue is confidence in expectations. So again, going back to our hypothetical example, 1 month before the pay increase, I ask you, how much do you expect to receive? And you say, well, Jason, I expect to receive 5%. And then I follow up that question by saying, are you confident in that expectation? Or how confident are you in that expectation? And in the first case, you say, well, I'm not confident at all. You ask me my expectation, so I gave you an expectation, but I have no confidence in it. From this theory's perspective, what that means is that you have quite a wide interval of confidence around your expectation. So even though you said, I expect to receive 5%, your possible range of outcomes, because you're not confident, might range from 0 to 10, something like this. So the theory suggests that any raise that you receive, any merit pay increase that you receive, likely will fall within this range of confidence. You expected 5, but it really could be anything between 0 and 10. So the result would be that in predicting your reaction, I am likely to see very little reaction to any increase that is more or less than your expectation, because all of them likely fall within your confidence interval. I don't want to say confidence interval, but I just said it because, of course, this has a different meaning for most of us. But the idea is, if you're not confident, even though you set an expectation at some level, any outcome likely falls within a range of possible values. But when you're very confident in your expectations, we would set a narrower range of potential outcomes around that level. So again, how much do you expect to receive? Well, I expect to receive 5%. Are you confident? Yes, I'm very confident. So what is the possible range of outcomes, merit raises, that you are likely to receive? So it might range from 4 to 6, a very narrow range. If this theory is correct, then any merit increase that deviates from this narrow range will produce a strong negative reaction. So if I say 5% and I receive 2%, I will be devastated. If I say I expect 5% and I receive 8%, I will be thrilled and excited. And the reason is because I was very confident in my initial expectation level of 5. All right, so if we plot this theory out, just in a simple depiction, it would look something like this. On the left side of the chart, we would have those who were not confident at all in their expectation, and the theory would predict very muted reactions to raises of all sizes, because those tend to fall within a wide range of potential outcomes or likely outcomes. But among those who have a lot of confidence, we would expect to see quite positive reaction among those who receive more than they expect, and a quite negative reaction among those who receive less than they expect. Okay, so those are the 4 theories in the study. A psychophysics theory, which suggests there are minimum thresholds for reaction. Value discrepancy theory, which suggests that we need to understand how much people value raises of different levels. And 2 expectations theories. One is based on the amount of control people have, and the other is based on the amount of confidence that they have. So to do the study, you might be interested in who is participating in the impact project. And the answer is that as long as you're using merit pay, as long as a company is using merit pay, they can participate. I don't care what type of work the people are doing or what type of ownership there is for the organization. All I care about is holding the merit pay plan constant, the fact that people are getting this type of performance-based pay. So as a result, many types of companies are participating: public, private, government, universities. There are some very small companies. One is 17 employees, I think, Indian company in India. And there are some large companies as well. Most of the companies are local. We do have some multinationals participating, but so far they're only participating in one unit or one country. The goal is to get at least 3 companies and a total of 500 people per country. So this is just a goal. Of course, I take whatever I can get, wherever I can get it. But the goal would be to have multiple companies in each country Otherwise, I have independence, a severe problem. Company and country are the same thing. So we try to get multiple companies participating in each country. It's easy in some places, it's a challenge in other places. Many different types of people are helping me on the project. Some people are interested in pay, some people are OB or HR researchers, but there are a variety of other researchers who are helping me, a couple of IB people and some psychologists and so forth. Some of the most helpful people are cross-cultural psychologists who are just helping me on the project because they are interested in the project from the perspective of cross-nation differences. They have no interest, if you will, in my research questions. They are interested in the study because it is a cross-nation study. The design of the study is quite simple. By field study design standards. By cross-cultural study design standards, it's quite complex. So we collect data at 2 waves. Phase 1, a few weeks before the pay increase, and phase 2, a few weeks after the pay increase. Phase 2 always occurs after people start receiving their pay, their new pay level. So they've at least had one paycheck or pay statement where they have received their new pay level. In between phase 1 and phase 2, people are given merit increases or not. To be included, they just have to be eligible to receive an increase. They don't necessarily have to receive one. But we collect the merit increase data from the organization, typically using a double-blind procedure, so we never know the identities of the participants. So phase 1, a few weeks before, phase 2, a few weeks after, with merit change captured in the middle from the organization's records. So you may be wondering how it's going. I've talked a lot about theory. So this is a color-coded chart that describes our progress on the project. So if the country is green in color, hopefully this is close to being updated. I think it is reasonably so. If the country is green in color, then that means we have data already collected there, or data collections are in progress. So I believe there are about 23 or so of those countries and territories. Some of them, unless you have a very large screen and you are looking very, very closely at it, some of them are quite difficult to see. For example, Israel is green, and next door to Israel is the Palestinian Authority. That is also green. There are a few stars out in the South China Sea. They seem to be floating a little bit, but these would represent places like Hong Kong and Macau, and some other places which are rather small on a big world map, like Taiwan and so forth. So I believe there are about 23 or so countries where we have full or partial data, or things are going on. As you can see, there is some differential coverage in the world. Some places we're making more progress than others, and I have a lot of work to do and still in certain areas of the world. It's been quite difficult in South America to get connections, although we have data now from Brazil and Peru. It's been also quite difficult in Central America to get connections. And in Africa, we've made a little bit of progress now. We have some data from Ghana in West Africa, from Zimbabwe and Botswana in south part of Africa. And we have some connections also in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Rwanda. In fact, someone that's helping me on the project just reported a couple of days ago that has found a company in Rwanda to participate. Rwanda, if you're not that familiar with it, is the very small green one there in the central part of Africa. We've done quite well in the north part of Asia, and we have data also from Indonesia, but again, there are quite a number of countries where I either have no solid connections to help me with the data collection, or things just we haven't made that much progress. If the country is colored a blue color, then this would mean that someone is helping me there, I have a partner there, or I'm talking to companies there, and things are progressing in a fairly good way, but so far we don't have a data collection scheduled there. Examples of this would be in Spain, in Sweden, in Canada, in Chile, in Australia. Australia has been actually quite difficult to make progress, but we've just signed an agreement a couple of days ago with someone who looks like we'll be able to get data finally from Australia. And if the country is red, that means that there is someone, that the country is in the project, but so far we haven't seen much progress in the data collections there. So that's the status. If the country is just a gray color, then these are countries that are yet to be captured in the impact project. But we're working on it, and if anybody in the audience has some ideas, then we are certainly, I'm certainly willing to talk to you about them. Just some descriptive results just as a way of closing. This is just a small sample of the countries we have in the project so far, and the pay increases that they have been given. So on the left column, these are actual pay increase amounts in the different countries. And so you can see some quite dramatic differences. Our sample in the US, the average pay increase was 3.63%. In China, it's about 10. Singapore, it's about 5. In Indonesia and India, where pay growth, but also inflation rates are higher, the pay increases are larger. In Brazil, also experiencing some inflation issues, a little bit higher. Norway and Botswana, a little bit lower. The second to the right column, excuse me, I went forward too quickly. The middle column is the amount people expect to receive in these countries. And as you can see, for the most part, they tend to be slightly less on average than the actual pay increase, which is something that's quite curious. China is one exception to that rule. But in general, the pay increases tend to be slightly, the expected pay increases tend to be slightly less than what people actually receive. The right-hand column is a report of what others in my work unit will receive. And as you can see, those on average tend to be slightly less than what people believe that they themselves will receive. Again, because of the positive, in this case, probably because of a positive performance bias, a self-rated performance bias. So you might be interested in how much people say would please them. And so the middle column here is at time 1, and this, or phase 1 questionnaire, and we ask people, what is the smallest % increase that would please you? And you can see what those levels are. The one on the right is the smallest amount that would make you work a little bit harder, or an effort change level. And as you can see, the effort change level tends to be a little bit larger than the amount that would please people. Again, this would not be too unexpected. And the last one I'll show here is the amount that people report that they actually received. So again, on the left column, here, you would see the amount that they actually received. And this is the amount that they reported that they received. And you can see in general that these amounts are less on average than the actual amount, which tells you something about the way organizations design pay systems, that they do not do in general a good job of communicating the system well. even in small increase countries like the US or Japan or Norway, people actually underreport the amount that they get on average. So there's an opportunity for organizations to improve reactions to their pay system just by communicating pay increases more effectively. Those are descriptive results. Eventually in the project, and I'm just about done here, we will get to other goals. One of them is to collect data on cultural and other values. People's reactions to their merit increase may depend on a variety of different cultural values and so forth. So we're collecting additional data from Hofstede's work, from the Globe study. Some of you will be familiar also with the World Values Survey, which is a quite rich data set of people's perceptions in different countries around the world. People's reactions will also depend on other factors like wage growth, inflation rates, the economic power of the countries that they're living in, and so forth. And so we'll also collect data on those issues and see if they can have any bearing or influence on individual reactions in these different places. We've got, in terms of the way forward, continued compiling of the data. We're recruiting for different companies coming up in Ghana, hoping to schedule an event in Spain at some point, and also some connections in Ethiopia. I've done quite a few recruiting events in places around the world already, and so either me or people that are helping me on the project will be doing some other recruiting events in different places coming up soon. If you're interested in participating in Impact as a researcher, please get in contact with me. You know, the idea would be that there would be one major impact paper, like in the Globe study. I think they had a paper that had 133 people on it or something like that. So the idea would be that there would be one major publication effort as a result of the general project, and there would be some opportunities if you are able to participate, help me obtain data in a certain locale to participate on that project. I have a goal also of doing a couple of different books, one of them being an edited book where there is some overview about the project, but the chapters are contributed by my local country partners. That is, they can describe the way things are in their country and maybe some country-specific results from the data that they have helped obtain, but also do some more general description. This is the way pay for performance is managed in my country. These are the particular labor laws or the labor environment that might affect the way these systems are administered and so forth. And so if you are a participating researcher on the project, then I would also envision that you would have some opportunity to contribute to this type of book. And if you also participate and are able to get to data in a particular location, then I would also allow you access to those data. For example, you might want to add a couple of measurements to your particular location's data set as a way of increasing its value to you. And you could certainly do that. My questionnaires are very, very short and to the point, not only because it's such a major effort that we want to make it easy for companies to participate, but also so we can be flexible and allow my partners in the different countries to also collect some data that they are interested in as a result. So that's all I have for you today. If you want to contact me about this project or for any other reason, here's my contact information, my email address. If you use one of these message programs, you can also contact me on those. You can also contact me or get more information at at my webpage. The easiest way to find me is just to type in Jason PolyU. There seems to be only one Jason at PolyU here in Hong Kong. So Jason at PolyU will usually get me. There's a supermodel named Jason Shaw. So if you type in Jason Shaw, you're likely to get the supermodel. That's not me. So if you can make it a little bit more specific, Jason at PolyU or Jason Shaw at PolyU, then you should be able to find me, no problem. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jihan for
Questions.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Shaw. I have some questions from the audience.
Okay.
One of them is this. What may be the best course of action when a person wants to express reactions to management? How can current job not be compromised?
Yeah. Wow, that's a hard question to answer. I mean, there is a large literature about this in terms of procedural justice systems and psychological safety and so forth. So I guess my only simple advice is to try to follow the formal mechanisms of the organization to express your opinions, or maybe find someone that you can trust or something like that.
Oh, great. Another question.
Certainly an issue in pay administration.
Right. Okay, perfect. Another question is about the data gathering. Is the use of social media like Facebook or using emails effective with your data gathering?
In terms of the actual data collections, because we have to be in the study, the company has to run a very specific design. So, which is a design before and after the pay increase, and also allowing us to obtain the pay data in terms of how much each person is receiving. So we don't use social media just because we are following the procedure. In terms of recruiting companies and so forth, I mean, we do use various electronic means to try to recruit companies for the project. But the data gathering itself has to follow a specific design.
Great. Thank you. Another question, Professor Shaw, is perception of control seems to be positively related to expectation of confidence.
Yeah.
Why the expected moderating effects of them are different as illustrated in your figures?
Yeah. So this is a great question. So they will be related. You know, if you have control over something, you obviously have more, you would clearly have more confidence in something. So these are different conceptual variables, but empirically and even conceptually, there is some overlap. So it is an open question whether I will find anything that is different for confidence and control. I was just telling you what the theories were, because these are the theories as they appear in the literature and the constructs that appear along with those theories. But it's an open question. We may find in the end that confidence and control are correlated very, very strongly, and they produce the same types of patterns. It's totally possible. All I was doing here is outlining the theories as they appear in the literature.
Wonderful. And one quick question is about the management of the project. What tools do you use to manage this project among so many different researchers?
Yeah, this is a great question. And the answer is we use whatever tools we can use. So I guess it tends to be idiosyncratic that I develop a way of communicating with each person that is helping me. I mean, the people that are helping me have been identified in many different ways. Some of them, for example, came from Michael Bond at the beginning of the project. He said, I know some psychologists who are working in these countries. I think they could help you. Some of them come from my own connections. Some of them come from the ambassadors program from the Academy of Management, where you have representatives of different companies. And some of them come from my own direct recruiting efforts. For example, holding recruitment workshops for researchers in different countries, or at conferences and so forth. So it's been idiosyncratic in terms of how the team has developed, and we just try to be. I try to be opportunistic in terms of finding people to help me.
Yeah, perfect. And another quick question is, what are your personal expectations about this research to the question of so what?
Well, this is a great question, an important one. So from a theory perspective, I mean, I'm mostly a theory guy, and I think that the study will move us forward in terms of theory. That is, we will put these different perspectives to a very wide-ranging competitive test, and one outcome will be that we will see which theory tends to hold in this global context. So in terms of moving us forward at a theoretical level, this is designed as if you will, a competitive or an alternative test, move us forward that way. But the other thing we found is that for each company that participates in the project, we have some very simple, the results tell us some very simple things that we are able to tell those companies to help them improve their pay system. In every case so far, we've been able to say to the companies, here are 2 or 3 things that if you correct will likely result in positive reactions, more positive reactions to pay increases the next time you give them.
Great, thank you. We finished the questions from the Zoom, but I have some questions from Facebook.
Okay.
We are live on Facebook. One question is, do you have any expectation to measure difference in attitudes toward pay increases based on age as well?
Good question. So we have age in the study. We capture age as a variable. This question very often comes up. Do people of different ages have different reactions to the increase? And the fact is, there is some evidence of that. I've only published one paper on this topic many years ago, but there is some evidence that age does make a difference in terms of how people react, and I'll eventually look at it. In terms of testing these theories that I outlined today, age would just be a control variable.
Wonderful. I go quickly. There's some more questions coming. We have about few minutes left, but okay, here's another question from Facebook. Merit pay would be a type of screening defined by Milgren and Roberts 1992, avoiding adverse selection. I guess that's a question. Looks like a sentence, but would merit pay be a type of screening, avoiding adverse selection?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on what this question is, but I think I would say that merit pay certainly has sorting effects for the organization. If it is implemented well, then one of the outcomes would be sorting of the workforce, creating differential pathways for good performers and poorer performers and so forth. So merit pay, if it's implemented well, is not necessarily a feel-good system for everyone, because it does create some winners and losers, if you will. So this has maybe some positive effects and maybe some negative effects. We would just have to try to balance those out.
Great. Another quick question from another audience member. You answered some of them in the presentation, but I'm going to read it to you because some of it I think you did not include in the presentation.
Okay.
How many countries participated in this project? How about other countries? And how did you select these countries?
Yeah.
And do you think those selected countries are reflect the world? And how do you validate the results?
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the number of countries currently in the project, there are about 50. I have data from about 23, somewhere in there. And the countries were selected basically like a snowball. This is opportunistic. Wherever we have, try to get the word out about the project and collect data as we see. Are they representative of the world? No. I mean, the data that we have are just examples of data that were collected in different places around the world. But there are too many people in too many countries to make statements about representativeness.
Wonderful. Last question. How do you deal with cultural diversity within a country? For example, China has subcultures across the nation, and Canada is very multicultural as a result of immigrants.
Yeah. So it's a great question.
Yeah.
So, you know, as researchers, we know we can do some things and we can't do other things. And in terms of collecting data that would allow us to do within country, cross-cultural, regional, perhaps comparisons, we just can't do it. It's too complicated. And basically every country of any size or any population level has many different subcultures. This is true in Canada, it's true in China, it's true in Australia, it's true in the countries in Europe. I mean, everywhere you go, Africa would be the same way. So it's too complicated.